Australian clothing company Rip Curl has been exposed for lying about where their clothes are being made. Many of the surf brand's garments labeled "Made in China" weren't actually made in China. They were made using slave labor in North Korea. Human rights groups believe that Rip Curl may not be the only one, though, and pressure is mounting on other similar companies like Quicksilver and Billabong, for example. Now people want them to present proof of where their products are being made as well. Joe, this is nuts. Rip Curl was actually basically forced into doing a public apology. They've taken responsibility. They're saying, yes, it is our fault, but they're still kind of like trying to spread the blame around to their subcontractors, saying, well, we didn't know. We simply didn't know. And I'm not buying that argument. The Oxfam CEO, she's also not buying it. Her name's Dr. Helen Zook. Here's what she said in a statement in response to Rip Curl's accusations of saying that it was the subcontractors and not them. This is what she said. Rip Curl has no excuse for not tracking clothing produced within its own supplier factories. Companies are responsible for human rights abuses within their businesses, not only morally, but also within United Nations guidelines on the responsibilities of businesses when it comes to human rights. I happen to agree wholeheartedly with Helen on this. You and I have both covered a lot of slave labor stories that are still going on. I can't believe it's 2016 and we're still dealing with this, but we are. This is where we're at. And this is different in a lot of ways, because if we're talking about clothing brands, let's say huge ones like H&M, for example, they were known, I did a story not long ago about how they were lying about the conditions that their factory workers were working in, right? Saying that, we've updated, certain safety precautions so that we never see, certain things happen in Bangladesh. For example, there was the whole building collapse where thousands of people were killed. They don't want to see that kind of stuff. And they say that they have safer conditions, but then people go undercover and they find that they're not. Same thing here. But I think this is a much bigger deal. You're completely lying about where the clothes are being produced. That is like next level lying. And the only way that anyone found out was because this wealthy businessman went down to Australia and he was touring these different factories just outside of Pyongyang. And he sees that all this Rip Curl stuff is being produced and it says made in China on it, and it's inside of a North Korean factory.
I think this is very different, though, because we are talking about North Korea, and because these countries, Australia included, have such poor relations with North Korea. I find it very hard to believe that a company like Rip Curl would have that kind of relationship with a factory in North Korea. Obviously, this was something in relation to their factories in China, subcontracting. I find it very plausible that they didn't know what was going on, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have been more diligent in investigating what their Chinese factories were actually doing. But I do find it hard to believe that Rip Curl would have had the ability to have a direct relationship with a factory in North Korea, or going in and out in this way, because we know how everything in North Korea is kept shut off from the rest of the world. I find it ironic, though, that this is a surf manufacturing company, because surfers are so environmentally conscious and in terms of humanitarian rights. It seems very ironic, and I wouldn't put it past a lot of the surfers to really sort of take a backlash about this double standard.
Yeah, and you touched on North Korea's dealings, their shady dealings, but that, if anything, only plays into what I'm saying. I mean, look at, for example, the amount of corruption that goes on in North Korea, okay? This kind of relationship between these subcontractors, these companies, and then factories in North Korea would be off the books anyway. Nobody would know about it. How would you and I know that they're doing these kinds of things? We would just be quick to say, oh, this probably isn't going on because it's North Korea. But if this stuff's off the books, then no one's going to know about it anyway. And we have to remember that this is a widespread practice. So Rip Curl's not the only one doing this kind of stuff. Maybe it's not North Korea necessarily, but this happens. Mislabeling happens all the time. And so to me, it's just kind of like, they're going to play that hand. Like, well, look at North Korea. We would never do business with them. But at the same time, they're just going to turn a blind eye to it. I personally don't buy that they didn't know. And I could see how some subcontractor could easily say, we're making your stuff in China, but then actually outsourcing it secretly to North Korea, and then probably bringing it back into China for shipment out, right? So no one's ever going to know. That's probably the case. But I'm going to say that Rip Curl just pretended they didn't see, and they actually knew it. But that's just my more cynical view, because I find it very hard to believe that a major corporation like Rip Curl doesn't know where their stuff's being made. I don't buy it. Maybe you do. Let us know in the comments. But this is where it stands. Apparently, a lot of Rip Curl's apparel is actually being made inside of North Korea.